Chuka Adelik was a man who had touched every gold thread Nigeria's economy offered, from telecommunications to oil and gas, and most lucratively, real estate. By the time he was 45, he had built an empire and a public image to match. Tall, with the kind of smile that suggested he'd heard every joke before and still found it tolerably amusing. Chuka was a man people liked and feared in equal measure. He wore confidence like cologne, rich, unmistakable, and impossible to ignore. Wherever he walked, he expected doors to open, and they did. Political godfathers called him partner, while governors borrowed his jets. He donated to hospitals, hosted quiet meetings in his private marina, and owned estates in Lekki that bore names like Echelon and the Aria. But it was in Banana Island where he built his fortress, a palatial home overlooking the lagoon, all glass, marble, and hushed lighting. It was in that house that Chuka lived like a modern king, surrounded by technology that responded to his voice and a staff that moved with the discipline of a private army. Even the paintings were imported, originals from Ben Nwanwu, Bruce Onobirkpia, and a commissioned piece by an up-and-coming Ethiopian surrealist that hung above the spiral staircase. And then, there was Amara. She had married him young, just 23, fresh out of Unilag with an economics degree she had barely used. The first time she met Chuka, he'd arrived at a friend's birthday party in a white G-Wagon, flanked by two silent men who never spoke but always watched. He wore an embroidered white kaftan and designer loafers that didn't touch sand. He spoke slowly, deliberately, the way rich men often do, like every sentence was a privilege, not a right. Chuka had taken one look at her and said, "You're too beautiful to be worried about student loans." By the next week, she was flying with him to Ghana. By the next month, he'd offered her an apartment in Ikoyi. By the 6th, they were married. In public, he was adoring. He held her hand at charity events, bought her limited edition Birkins in muted shades, and posted occasional couple photos captioned with quotes from Rumi. But inside the house, behind the drawn blinds and marble counters, Chuka was something else entirely. He didn't hit her. That would have been too crude. But he diminished her, one cutting comment at a time. "Don't speak on things you don't understand," he'd say when she gave opinions on business. "It's cute when you try to be deep," he once told her when she spoke about a book she was reading. When she cried, he offered her tissue and silence. That was Chuka. Clean hands, cruel eyes. Still, Amara played her role. She smiled when guests were around. She dressed like money, walked like silk, and made sure his dinner was always warm. She was the perfect society wife, visible but silent, beautiful but tame. But perfection, as always, had its cracks. Dull Wednesday afternoon, while searching through one of his old office drawers looking for an invoice, that Amara found it. The envelope was cream, sealed at the edges, labeled confidential in small gold print. She opened it without thinking. Inside was a life insurance document. International. Clean. Legal. Policyholder, Mr. Chuka David Adelik. Beneficiary, Mrs. Amara Adelik. Amount, $10 million. She read it again. $10 million. US dollars. Payable immediately upon his death, provided the cause was natural or not under investigation. She read that part 3 times. A silence swelled in her chest. She folded the paper back into the envelope, her fingers steady but her heart galloping like a drummer on fire. She wasn't a violent person. She hated crime movies. She cried at sad commercials. But $10 million was a different kind of whisper. It didn't shout. It murmured. It seduced. Chuka had made her rich, but not free. Every time she went out, she had to say where, with who, and why. Every house staff reported back to him, even the ones who smiled at her like they were loyal. She had a driver, but not her own car. Even her bank accounts had alerts that went to his phone. Freedom was not the wardrobe or the perfumes or the trip to St. Tropez. It was independence. And she didn't have that. But $10 million could buy it. She could disappear into Europe, start her own business, buy a vineyard in Cape Town, or better yet, change her name and begin again in Portugal. There were endless possibilities in a world where she no longer had to ask for permission. The only thing between her and that world was a man who didn't believe she could survive without him. So she began to plan, not with poison or guns or movie-style drama, but with patience. She started studying his habits more closely. He had mild ulcers. He drank hard liquor almost every night. He took sleeping pills when he traveled and sometimes washed them down with brandy. He refused to see doctors regularly, said hospitals made him feel mortal. She noticed how he always drank water before bed. From the fridge. Chilled. Always the same glass. Always the same timing. That was a routine she could work with. But before she did anything, she needed to gather her own foundation. Accounts. Passports. Documents. She quietly went to a private wealth advisor, someone Chuka didn't know, and opened an offshore account in Mauritius. Used her cousin's address as a legal point of contact. That night, they had dinner on the terrace. A chef prepared roasted duck with wine Chuka imported from Argentina. He complimented the meal and scrolled through his iPad. Amara sat across from him, wearing a pearl drop necklace and thinking about death. His death. The first time the idea entered her mind. Rich, but not free. Every time she went out, she had to say where, with who, and why. Every house staff reported back to him, even the ones who smiled at her like they were loyal. She had a driver, but not her own car. Even her bank accounts had alerts that went to his phone. Freedom was not the wardrobe or the perfumes or the trip to St. Tropez. It was independence. And she didn't have that. But $10 million could buy it. She could disappear into Europe, start her own business, buy a vineyard in Cape Town, or better yet, change her name and begin again in Portugal. There were endless possibilities in a world where she no longer had to ask for permission. The only thing between her and that world was a man who didn't believe she could survive without him. So she began to plan, not with poison or guns or movie-style drama, but with patience. She started studying his habits more closely. He had mild ulcers. He drank hard liquor almost every night. He took sleeping pills when he traveled and sometimes washed them down with brandy. He refused to see doctors regularly, said hospitals made him feel mortal. She noticed how he always drank water before bed. From the fridge. Chilled. Always the same glass. Always the same timing. That was a routine she could work with. But before she did anything, she needed to gather her own foundation. Accounts. Passports. Documents. She quietly went to a private wealth advisor, someone Chuka didn't know, and opened an offshore account in Mauritius. Used her cousin's address as a legal point of contact. Used a lawyer from a friend of a friend who specialized in private estate setups. She told no one. She withdrew small amounts of cash every week, converted them to dollars, and kept them in a locked pouch at the back of her shoe closet. She started paying attention to herbs, toxins, medicines that mimic natural deaths. On her iPad, she opened incognito browsers, researched symptoms. Half of it terrified her, but she kept going. She even started journaling again, writing things down like puzzles, so the guilt wouldn't sit in her chest all day. The journal was disguised in an old cover titled Recipes from Lagos Markets, a book no one in that house would ever touch. One night, while Chuka was in Accra for a meeting, Amara tested how fast the staff noticed if something was amiss. She told the chef she would handle dinner herself. "No need for you tonight," she said with a soft smile. "Go home early. I'm in the mood to try cooking again." The chef looked surprised, but nodded. He trusted her now. She cooked a simple meal, boiled yam and egg sauce. Nothing dangerous. She took her time, measured everything, observed how long the staff stayed around before disappearing to their quarters. The answer was, not long. And no one checked the fridge. No one noticed the glass he always used. No one monitored what went into it. She was safe. When Chuka returned, the staff resumed as normal. The routine continued. But Amara now had certainty. She only needed one more piece to fall into place. Opportunity. Opportunity, as it often does, came cloaked in the ordinary. It arrived on a humid Thursday, hidden in an invitation. Chuka was to deliver a keynote speech at a real estate investment summit in Abuja. It would be an overnight trip. He preferred flying in on a private jet, sleeping in the presidential suite of the Transcorp Hilton, and returning the following evening. He mentioned it over breakfast. "Should be quick," he said, spreading jam on his toast. "They want me to talk about infrastructure growth and foreign capital." "Same old." Amara nodded, sipping her papaya juice. "You'll kill it." He barely looked up. "You don't want to come?" "No," she said sweetly. "Abuja's always too dry for me." He smirked. True. When he left the next morning, Amara walked him to the car as usual. He kissed her cheek, climbed into the Range Rover, and was gone. And in that instant, she exhaled. She had exactly 36 hours. She began moving like someone rehearsing choreography. First, she went to her private jeweler's office under the pretext of picking up a bracelet she had custom ordered. She paid in cash, $5,000, taken from her shoe closet stash. She smiled, joked with the jeweler, and left with the bracelet in a silver pouch. But that wasn't the purpose of the visit. What she truly needed was to be seen, to be remembered, to plant alibis across Lagos like little safety pins holding up her future. Next, she went to a boutique in Victoria Island, tried on clothes she didn't need, laughed loudly, and took a selfie with the store owner, a woman who adored her. She posted it to Instagram with a light caption, "Girls who shop hard, sleep well," followed by 3 heart emojis. Then, she returned home and entered the kitchen. It was empty. The chef had the day off. The steward was outside sweeping the terrace. She opened the medicine drawer slowly, then closed it. No, too obvious. Instead, she returned upstairs to her personal bathroom, where she kept her skincare fridge. Inside was a vial of prescription melatonin drops, stronger than average, imported from Europe. She'd ordered it online months ago for her anxiety. She opened the bottle and dropped a few samples into an empty perfume tester bottle, then cleaned it thoroughly. After that, she took Chuka's preferred glass, the thick tumbler with gold trim, a gift from a business partner, and sterilized it. She filled it halfway with Evian, then carefully added 12 drops of the liquid. It dissolved instantly. No color, no smell, no sign. She placed the glass at the back of the fridge, beside the sparkling water. Chuka always drank water before bed, never chilled, but cool. She arranged everything as he liked it. Then she sat on the bed and waited. The next evening, he returned, grumbling about the uselessness of government ministers and the weak air conditioning in the Hilton boardroom. "I need a drink," he muttered, walking toward the minibar. "You'll feel better after food," Amara said, already heading downstairs. Dinner was light. Sia-spiced chicken, couscous, grilled peppers. Chuka ate quickly, complained about a tax issue in Port Harcourt, and barely noticed her silence. "I'm taking my pills," he said as he got up. He always said it aloud, like a ritual. She nodded. "Your water's in the fridge." He walked to the kitchen, retrieved the glass, and drank it in 2 full gulps. By the time they got to the bedroom, he was yawning. "Long week," he mumbled, undressing. She said nothing, only smiled. Within 20 minutes, he was asleep. Soft snoring, deep breathing, face down, arms slung over his side of the bed. Amara stayed still. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. He didn't stir. She got up, retrieved his phone, biometric lock, of course, and placed his thumb on the sensor. It opened. She navigated to his banking app. Access granted. She photographed every screen. Account numbers, balances, notifications. Next, she accessed his email. Found the estate lawyer's details. Forwarded the most recent file to her own account. She wiped everything clean. Returned the phone. Climbed back into bed. And waited. Morning arrived with the golden hush of Banana Island mornings. Birds cooed from the mango trees. A housekeeper vacuumed softly downstairs. Chuka didn't wake up. Amara leaned in and touched his arm. "Chuka," she said lightly. No movement. She pressed her hand to his chest. Still, silent. She reached for her own phone, heart steady. She called the in-house nurse they kept on retainer, a woman named Mrs. Grace, who had worked for the Adeliks for years. "Something's wrong with Oga," she said, breathless. "He won't wake up." Grace arrived within 10 minutes. She took one look, checked his pulse, then looked back at Amara with panic in her eyes. "He's not breathing," she said, voice small. Amara burst into tears. The autopsy report would later say, heart failure, induced by underlying health conditions and sedative interaction. No foul play suspected. The funeral was a performance. Gold-trimmed casket. 5 choirs. Politicians flew in from Abuja. Newspapers called him a beacon of African excellence. Amara wore all black, a netted veil, and sat like a woman holding herself together by string. Condolences poured in. She never broke. Not at the gravesite. Not at the memorial. Not when they read his will and found that yes, indeed, everything was in her name. She gave generous donations to all staff. She made a sizable gift to an orphanage Chuka used to support. She made appearances, said soft things about grief and strength, and posted a black square on her Instagram with the caption, "You were my forever. Sleep now, love." 3 weeks later, the insurance payment hit her Mauritius account. 10 million, just like the policy said. But Lagos is not a city that sleeps for long. It started with a whisper, a curious comment from Chuka's business partner, a subtle question from a cousin in the police force. Then, a story appeared in a small blog. Nothing damning, just rumors. A source claimed Chuka had been healthy. Another mentioned the nurse had seemed too quiet during the funeral. Amara ignored them, until one day, she received a call from a woman she did not recognize. "Mrs. Adelik," the voice said flat. "I know what you did." The line went dead. She stared at the phone for 5 minutes. The next morning, she discovered someone had tried to access her offshore account. From Lagos. At first, she thought it was paranoia, a coincidence, a system error. But when she logged into the Mauritius account again, the interface had changed. Her password didn't work. After 3 failed attempts, she reset it using her recovery email, and what she saw made her blood turn to ice. A $1 wire transfer had been initiated, just $1, to a suspicious Nigerian fintech wallet. A ping, a probe. Someone had found the account. Someone was trying to see if it was real. She changed all her passwords that night, hired a cybersecurity firm under a fake name, moved the bulk of the money to a new Swiss account. It was exhausting, but she moved quickly, efficiently, like a machine built for escape. The world outside her gates no longer looked the same. Every knock at the door made her pause. Every unfamiliar car idling near her compound made her draw the curtain. Banana Island was still manicured, still quiet, but now it felt like glass, ready to shatter at any moment. One afternoon, 2 men in black suits came to her gate. They introduced themselves as officials from the Pension and Life Insurance Regulatory Commission. The steward came to inform her, "Madam, they say they just need to verify some details. Tell them to come back with a formal letter." The steward blinked. "They said they already sent one." She nodded. "Then they'll understand that I'm not in the mood today." She didn't sleep that night. The investigation began quietly. A request for the autopsy report from an independent agency. Then, a call from her late husband's lawyer, subtly probing whether she'd had any suspicions about Chuka's heart health. When she played dumb, he sounded surprised. "He never mentioned his ulcer flare-ups to you?" She responded perfectly. "I thought it was under control. We weren't even using a full-time doctor anymore. That's why we kept Grace on staff, routine checks." She almost choked on the irony. Routine checks, indeed. Then came a notice from her bank in London. A financial review. Standard procedure, they said. Triggered by recent insurance activity. The message was clear. She was on someone's radar. She tried to get ahead of the story. She donated more, $200,000 to a mental health foundation. She arranged an interview with a lifestyle magazine, speaking in poetic fragments about grief, clarity, and the loneliness of sudden widowhood. Her followers sympathized. Her publicist called it her most human moment yet. But behind closed doors, cracks were widening. One night, she discovered the steward reading from her journal, the one disguised as a recipe book. He had picked it up from her dressing table, flipping pages as if looking for tips on spices. She snatched it from his hands. He stammered, "Oh, madam, I thought it was kitchen something. I just wanted to." She slapped him before she could stop herself. Hard. His lip bled. Her hand trembled. "Get out," she said. That night, she burned the journal. Every last page. A month passed, then another. And just when the air began to feel still again, the storm broke. The official letter arrived from the Lagos State Criminal Investigation Department. Subject: Re-examination of cause of death, Chuka Adelik. It was worded carefully, dressed in bureaucratic politeness. But its implications were razor-sharp. The next day, 2 officers visited the house, not in suits, but in uniform. They asked to sit down. She offered them juice. They declined. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about your late husband's final evening," one of them said, his voice flat and unreadable. "Of course," she said, smiling faintly. "Anything to assist." They asked about the dinner, the wine, his mood, his medications, his sleep habits. She answered calmly, playing her part like a woman with nothing to hide. Then came the curveball. "Did he drink anything that night before sleeping?" the younger officer asked, almost casually. She paused. "Water, I think." "From the fridge?" "Yes." "Did you serve it to him?" The room felt hot. "No," she said, shifting slightly. "He got it himself." "Are you sure?" She smiled again. He was very independent. The officers exchanged a look. "We'll be in touch." It wasn't the water. It wasn't even the pills. It was Grace, the nurse. She had been quiet during the funeral because she had been afraid. But silence, as it turned out, had a lifespan. 2 days later, Amara received another visit, this time from 2 plainclothes detectives and a woman from the Anti-Fraud Bureau. "Mrs. Adelik, we're reopening the investigation formally." She said nothing. "We have reason to believe your husband may have ingested a sedative that was not prescribed." Still silence. The house nurse, Grace Orgy, has submitted a statement indicating inconsistencies in the events following your husband's death. Amara blinked. "I don't understand." She says she was told to dispose of the water glass before paramedics arrived. The room tilted. "I never." She says she found residue at the bottom of the glass. "A cloudy film." "That's not." "Your kitchen was sterilized before we arrived." "Bleached." "Completely." Unusually so for a residence that just experienced a medical emergency. Her mouth opened, then closed. "There's also the matter of the life insurance payout." "That's my money," she said finally, voice trembling. "We'll see," the woman said coldly. "Please come with us." They took her in quietly. No sirens. No cuffs. Just 2 unmarked cars, tinted and still, idling outside the Adelik estate while she stepped into her flats and wrapped a scarf around her shoulders like it was a regular outing. As they drove through the gates, the staff watched silently, eyes lowered, faces blank. Not one of them waved. At the SCID headquarters, they processed her like a guest at a bad hotel. Mugshot. Fingerprints. Phone taken. Belongings bagged. A polite but firm officer led her to a private room. Cool, gray, metallic smelling. She sat alone for 37 minutes before anyone entered. Then came the interrogation. Not the noisy, violent kind Nollywood dramatized. This was different. Professional. Cold. 3 officers. A recorder. "Mrs. Adelik, we have gathered statements suggesting that you may have had knowledge of your husband's health conditions and administered unprescribed sedatives on the night of his death. Do you deny this?" She said nothing. "Are you aware that tampering with evidence, including instructing a staff member to destroy a drinking glass, constitutes obstruction of justice?" She crossed her arms. "Is it true you were the sole beneficiary on a $10 million insurance policy taken out 18 months before his death?" Her voice, when it came, was thin but sharp. That was his decision. Was it also his decision to die? That silence, heavy and deafening, folded the room inward. They leaned forward, waiting. She blinked once. "I want my lawyer." The press got wind of it by evening. "Widow or murderess?" Amara Adelik detained in husband's suspicious death, read the Lagos Signal headline. Social media erupted. Hashtag Justice for Chuka trended on Twitter. Bloggers reposted old photos. Amara in silk, smiling beside her husband at charity events. Others dug up grainy shots from her Unilag days. A video surfaced of her laughing at a yacht party. That laugh, once a symbol of wealth, now looked menacing. She planned it. She always looked too perfect. She didn't even cry at the funeral. Chuka deserved better. The court of public opinion ruled swiftly. By the time her lawyer, an old family contact from Enugu, got the case, the prosecution had already begun to assemble evidence. Forensics, testimony, financial documents, digital trails. The digital trails were the most damning. Her browser history, deleted emails, account movements. The Mauritius bank login traced to Lagos IPs. The attempt to rewire the funds to Switzerland. Everything whispered, calculated. Everything screamed, intentional. Bail was denied. She spent 3 nights in a holding cell reserved for high-profile women, private, but cold, stripped of all silk and perfume. Her nails chipped. Her curls lost their bounce. The quiet was absolute. On the 4th day, Grace visited her. The nurse wore a blue blouse and a simple ponytail. She didn't sit. "I didn't want to testify," she said softly. "But I saw that glass. I saw what you did." Amara's voice cracked. "You don't understand. You didn't live with him." "You lived," Grace said. "He didn't." And she walked away. The trial began 3 months later. Lagos turned it into a national event. The courtroom was packed. Women wore geli. Men whispered into microphones. Journalists camped outside like it was a concert. There were TikTok summaries, parody skits, hashtag campaigns. Inside, the prosecution painted Amara as the patient viper, a woman who wore elegance like camouflage, who had smiled while planning death. They played recordings, displayed bank logs, presented photos of the sterilized kitchen, the altered journal, partially recovered from her cloud backup. Amara's team argued emotional abuse, psychological oppression. They described her as a woman pushed to a corner by a powerful man, gaslit and controlled. A victim first. The judge listened. The jury took notes. The verdict took 4 days. Guilty. Count 1, premeditated manslaughter. Count 2, obstruction of justice. Count 3, financial fraud. The insurance money was frozen. The estate seized. Her offshore accounts placed under global investigation. She was sentenced to 35 years in prison, with parole eligible after 20. At sentencing, she stood motionless, dressed in beige, no makeup, hair in a bun. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Only when she was led away did she pause at the courtroom door. She looked back once, at the judge, the flashing cameras, the crowded gallery. And then, she was gone. In Banana Island, the house remained empty. The marble fountain no longer flowed. No lilies scented the air. Only silence lived there now. A silence too still to be luxurious. A silence that could not be cleaned away.